Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having the best day possible. I've got quite a fun video for you today. I really think this is going to be a good one, and that's the coolest inventions from each state in America. So there's 50 states. I know many of you American viewers are from all over, so I hope that you get to see a cool invention that originated from your state. If you disagree with the invention in the video, please let me know some other inventions that came from your state. But this is going to be extremely fun. So without any further delay, let's get right into it.
What is going on, everyone? What was the coolest thing invented in your state? Most of us learned about something that was invented wherever we came from while we were growing up, talked about it in school, whatever. I always found that very interesting. You could take a little pride in something that, bettered society if it was invented in your state in a way. I've had a few Texans bring up how Dr. Pepper was invented or created in their state. They always act like they had something to do with it too. It's really weird. But anyway, which one is the most important, cool, or just popular is debatable. We had a...
Folks, you wouldn't believe this, right? But I've never had a Dr. Pepper in my whole entire life. I know it's a very popular drink in the United States, but you don't really find them in South Africa. I think maybe in one of the international aisles you might be able to get one. Never had a Dr. Pepper, so give me some idea what it tastes like. Maybe I should do a video at some point where I order some American drinks and try them for the very first time. Maybe that could be quite a fun video.
Group discussion here at World According to Briggs, and we couldn't decide on how we should approach this subject. Important to society, most mass-produced, what was the most interesting? In the end, we just thought we would decide on a state-by-state basis, just whichever one we thought was the best one. This should be fun. If you think we're wrong on what the coolest in your state was, let us know in the comment section below.
Absolutely.
There's no right, no wrong answer here. This is just kind of an opinion. All right, let's take a look. Alabama. Alabama is a pretty interesting state for a lot of different reasons, but did you know the electric hearing aid was invented in Alabama? And it's got an interesting backstory. A man named Miller Reese Hutchinson spent 4 years researching this because he had a friend who had become deaf and mute after a childhood case of scarlet fever. He designed, worked on it, and created it at Alabama Medical College in 1898. That's how long they've been around. Alaska. Alaska gave us ranch dressing. No kidding.
The hearing aid from Alabama. That is a fantastic invention. So you folks in Alabama, you guys created the hearing aid, which is still used to this day. Kudos.
A plumber named Steve Henson was kind of the cook for this remote job site in Alaska in the 1950s. And one day, I guess they were out of, mustard or other salad dressing, and he decided to spice up buttermilk, mayonnaise with some herbs, threw it on a salad. And it was a big hit. He continued to make it, and then he got married. Him and his wife moved to California and opened up a restaurant called Hidden Valley Ranch. Alaska also gave us kayaks. I feel that one needs to be mentioned too.
So kayaks, that to me is a very, very cool invention. Ranch dressing. I have never had ranch dressing in my life. It seemed like it was a fairly simple concoction of some popular dressings. So yeah, folks, let me know. Am I missing out by never having had ranch dressing? I'd be interested to know.
Arkansas. Now this one we were kind of on the fence with because Walmart comes from Arkansas, and that's really not an invention. It's just really a business, but it's still got its roots in Arkansas. But this one may shock some of you. Movies with sound started in Arkansas. A man named Freeman Owens put sound to film in 1923 and held 200 patents during his lifetime.
Wow.
Arizona. The taser.
Inventor.
Everyone knows and loves the taser. You can watch YouTube videos about people getting tased all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do, sadly. The taser was invented in Arizona by a NASA scientist named Jack Cover. Now, he developed the taser in the 1970s, but it used gunpowder to actually launch the prongs. Well, nobody was buying it, and the business eventually collapsed. Well, around 1993, two Arizona brothers reached out to Cover and asked him to help them develop a taser that could be sold to civilians for personal protection. Maybe it was the time or the switch over to compressed air instead of gunpowder. Either way, it started selling, and now it's a big part of law enforcement and people trying to get to their car at the mall in the middle of the night.
So that is interesting. I just thought a taser was part of everyday life from far back when, but it only gained increased popularity after a redesign in the 1990s. Let me know, folks, did you know about that? I always thought tasers came way before then. So that's very interesting to know.
California, the iPhone. Yes, in 2007, Steve Jobs brought us the iPhone. I should say a bunch of engineers at Apple, along with Steve Jobs pushing it, brought us the iPhone. In 2007 is when it launched, and in 2007, Time Magazine named it the Invention of the Year. Colorado, the cheeseburger. Yes, McDonald's.
Okay, that's the best invention of all time. Let's be honest. The cheeseburger from Colorado, that is the best invention of all time. But talking about the iPhone, let's just talk about phones in general, folks. What would you say? Would you say that life has improved for you ever since you've gotten your smartphone? Or would you say that life was better back in the day with a more simple phone, maybe the black and white phones? I'd definitely be interested to know. Technology has taken a firm grasp of our lives, so maybe the iPhone might not even be the best invention, but the cheeseburger, that is the best invention.
Burger King, none of them came up with the cheeseburger. It was actually Denver's Humpty Dumpty Drive-In. They had this crazy idea to put some cheese on meat and then put 2 pieces of bun around it. I think they had hamburgers already at that point, but putting the cheese on it was just groundbreaking.
Deserved the Nobel Peace Prize.
Vulcanized rubber. Vulcanized rubber doesn't sound like a big deal to most people, but Charles Goodyear discovered the secret of vulcanizing rubber, a process named after the Roman god of fire, Vulcan. And it's not just in tires, it's life jackets, gloves, pencil erasers, all kinds of good stuff use vulcanized rubber. Runner-up for this one was the can opener. Came from Connecticut.
That's
Delaware.
The best one.
Kevlar.
Better
Kevlar came from Dow Chemicals, and it was invented by Stephanie Kwolek. She was a longtime chemist at DuPont, and she discovered this synthetic fiber that's bulletproof. I mean, it saved a lot of lives, saved a lot of injuries. I, could have at least gotten a couple dozen stitches if it wasn't for a Kevlar helmet on a couple occasions, actually. But she invented this in the 1960s, and now it's everywhere. Runner-up in Delaware was, again, at DuPont in the 1930s. It was nylon. Florida. Florida gets 2, and they both have to do with how hot it is in Florida. One, this is where air conditioning was invented.
Really?
The original version of air conditioning was just basically blowing air over frozen towels and different fabrics, things like that. The second thing that was invented in Florida that I think is significant, Gatorade. An assistant for the University of Florida's football team asked university scientists about why so many of their players were having heat-related injuries and all that. And they decided it was because electrolytes. So they decided to come up with a drink that would replace electrolytes. That drink is Gatorade. And the reason they named it that, the University of Florida's football team is the Gators. Georgia. Georgia has quite a few things. Coca-Cola, different forms of anesthesia, but probably the most important thing ever created in Georgia was the cotton gin. The cotton gin was invented by Eli Whitney in 1794. He'd been working on it for some time, but this amazing machine separated cotton fiber from the seeds, which used to be picked out by hand, one little seed at a time. Hawaii. Surfing. They attribute Hawaiians to surfing. There's a lot of discussion on where it may have actually started, but what we know as surfing today is attributed to Hawaii. I mean, they perfected it and they made it popular. And they have some of the best surf in the world, too, so it only makes sense. Idaho. Idaho invented television. Well, sort of. The original blueprints for television were drawn on a high school chemistry classroom blackboard in Idaho by a guy named Farnsworth in the early 1900s. But he didn't actually get around to making the device until 1927, when he relocated to San Francisco. Is anyone else surprised that Idaho's invention didn't have something to do with fishing with explosives? Illinois.
That guy created the television, guys. What an invention that turned out to be. Unbelievable.
The transistor. Yep, in Chicago, Illinois, in a hotel room, William Shockley developed the first junction transistor in 1948. And if you don't know what that is, that's just a device that turns electric current on and off. These days, it's much more advanced, and it does everything from turn on lights to open your car doors with your remote, things like that. Indiana, the washing machine.
Interesting to note, this was 10 years ago, but 10 years ago, the iPhone had over 2 billion little transistors or switches in its computer chip. So that just shows how advanced we have gotten to the point that switches can be created so tiny and minuscule. So unbelievable, but he was the first one to create that. Good on you, because that's become a very, very crucial and important invention in modern technology.
all have a machine doing our laundry these days because of a dude in Indiana. His name was William Blackstone, and he built the first rotary machine that removed dirt from clothes as a birthday gift to his wife in 1874. That is an incredible gift. I mean, he didn't just give it to his wife, he gave it to all of us. Iowa. The first gas-powered tractor was invented in Iowa. An Iowa farmer named John Froelich got tired of dragging a steam engine out to the fields, and he came up with the gas-powered tractor. Kansas. The helicopter. I was going to go with the icy, you know, like the Slurpee type thing. That was invented in Coffeyville, Kansas at a Dairy Queen, but we're going to go with helicopters. So there was a local inventor type dude in Kansas named Rex Manival. He developed the helicopter in 1939. He only got so far with his invention before other people took it over and kind of ran with it. I mean, when he was doing it, he was only going a couple feet off the ground and it was always attached to the ground by ropes. But he could lift off the ground with a helicopter, and yeah, that's where it started in Kansas. Kentucky, bourbon, baby. And the song Happy Birthday, but we're going to go with bourbon. I wonder if the two of those had anything to do with each other. But no, bourbon was invented in Kentucky. There's a little discussion on who actually came up with bourbon and who first distilled it, but a lot of people attribute it to a Kentucky Baptist minister named Elijah Craig. He's the one that everyone thinks actually came up with bourbon. Louisiana, jazz. Most of this list is actually things you can put your hands on. Jazz you can't put your hands on, but I think this one's important. The first mention of jazz music was in 1916 in an article of the New Orleans Times, where they actually called it JAS bands, like jazz instead of a Z and S. Anyway, that was the first time it was ever mentioned. To know who actually invented jazz, well, that's impossible, but more than 100 years later, New Orleans is known as the birthplace of jazz. It's also the birthplace of poker. Maine, the diving suit. Yeah, you gotta have a diving suit if you're gonna jump in the water in Maine. It's normally really cold. While metal diving suit concepts date way back to the 17th century, Leonard Necross patented the first rubber diving suit in 18...
Can we also just talk about how beautiful Maine looks, guys? I mean, Maine just looks fantastic.
1934. They also invented donuts there. Maryland. Bottle caps. They invented bottle caps in Maryland. A man named William Painter invented the bottle cap in 1891. Massachusetts. Facebook. Yes, Mark Zuckerberg developed it in his dorm room at Harvard. He also sort of had to settle with the dudes he kind of took the idea.
Okay, so this is a controversial one. I still use Facebook to this day. What do you folks think of Facebook? And as a whole, what do you folks think of social media? Are you a fan of social media? Are you against it? Are you for it and against it at the same time? I feel like the beauty of social media is that you can reconnect with people that you've not been in contact with for a long time. And you can stay in contact with family and friends and see what they're up to. The bad thing about social media is it becomes addictive and it controls your life, and then you live on your phone or on your laptop or whatever constantly. So there's pros and cons. I'll be interested to know what your opinions are of social media.
Idea from, but regardless of the backstory, Facebook was developed at Harvard, which is in Massachusetts. Michigan, the automobile assembly line. Now, the Model T Ford was also created here too, but Ford wasn't the first automobile assembly line. The first one was actually done by Ransom E. Olds, who came up with the Oldsmobile, and that was in 1901. Minnesota. Rollerblades. Now, everyone knows that Scotch tape and Post-it notes came from Minnesota, but not everyone knows rollerblades came from Minnesota. Scott and Brennan Olson invented rollerblades in 1980. Mississippi, Pine Sol. You know the cleaning product? Guys. Pine Sol was invented in the Magnolia State. Chemist Harry A. Cole was living in some forests near Jackson, Mississippi, amongst all the pine trees, and started testing it as a disinfectant and deodorizer. And now we have Pine Sol, and if you ever spent any time in the military, you know everything is cleaned with Pine Sol. Missouri. The ice cream cone. The first ever ice cream cone was invented, but it first showed up at the 1904
Good on you, Missouri. This is a crucial invention.
St. Louis World's Fair. Montana, the portable heart monitor. So for all you with a bad ticker, you could thank Montana for it. Actually, Helena, Montana was where it came from. Norman Jeffers Holter founded the Holter Research Foundation, and in 1947, he invented the wearable Holter heart monitor. Nice. Very get out and get around. Nebraska. The ski lift. Yeah, the ski lift. Nebraska is one of the flattest states we have, and they came up with a ski lift. Well, the first time it was put in use was actually in Idaho. The reason the ski lift was invented wasn't for skiers. It was actually to move bushels of bananas. Nevada, blue jeans.
Ooh, blue jeans. So I've never been skiing in my life, folks. Let me know, am I missing out? Have you folks gone skiing? Those who haven't, do you still want to? Or am I just not missing out on that much? Let me know.
In 1873, Levi Strauss introduced something that would become iconic for America. It is probably the most successful article of clothing that the United States has ever had, and probably the world. New Hampshire. The Segway. Yeah, you know that funky thing that's replaced walking, or they want it to? The Segway was invented in Manchester, New Hampshire by Dean Kamen. He's an American engineer who's come up with all kinds of crazy stuff. Right now he's working on a water purification system that could, turn swamp water into drinkable water. And it's pretty impressive. He's done things like the first at-home dialysis machine and a few other things. The guy's a genius. And
I'd put that over the Segway. Guys, I think those inventions are slightly more important. The Segway, I watch YouTube videos all the time of people falling over on these things. I mean, how useful can those be? But an at-home dialysis machine, that seems pretty crucial.
Still alive. A lot of people think he's dead because the guy that bought Segway from him drove a Segway off a cliff a year after buying the company. New Jersey, the light bulb. Thomas Edison gave us the light bulb, and his laboratory was in Menlo Park, New Jersey, not Menlo Park, California. In a 2-year time frame in the late 1800s, he made over 3,000 different types of light bulbs trying to make one work. The way he wanted it to, I should say. New Mexico, the atomic bomb. Yes, we have New Mexico to blame for blowing up a couple cities in Japan back in the 1940s. The creation of the first atomic bomb was done in Alamogordo, New Mexico. New York, toilet paper. Toilet paper comes to us from the great state of New York. In 1857, an entrepreneur named Joseph Gady developed the first paper that was designed for your backside. North Carolina, the airplane. The Wright brothers first flew and got their business off the ground, quite literally, in North Carolina at Kitty Hawk. They actually first flew at a place called Kill Devil Hill, but Kitty Hawk sounds nicer when you're telling the story. People from Ohio like to argue this one because the Wright brothers are from Dayton, Ohio, but they first flew at Kitty Hawk or Kill Devil Hill. North Dakota, the Kodak camera. Yes, it's from North Dakota. I would have never guessed that one. I would have thought, someplace with a lot of industry like, maybe Ohio or New York or something like that, but North Dakota. Ohio, the traffic light. That's not as exciting as Superman. Superman was created in Glenville, which is a neighborhood in Cleveland, in 1933 by Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. They sold the rights to DC Comics in 1938 for, get this, $130. That's almost $3,000 in today's money. Oklahoma.
You know what's funny, guys? In South Africa, guess what we call traffic lights? We call them robots. So whenever we get to a traffic light, we'll say, okay, there's a red robot, green robot, yellow robot, indicating the color. I don't know why we call them robots, but that's just like one of the terms we have. There's so many, Western, names for things that we have completely weird other names for. One day, if you're ever interested, I can give you, the South African slang translation for many of the words you have at home. But if you're ever interested, we call traffic lights robots, and I do not know why. Maybe it was just such a technologically advanced thing when it came out that we just like, man, this is a robot, and it just stuck ever since. Who knows?
Oklahoma, the parking meter. The parking meter was created in Oklahoma City, who had a problem. They didn't have enough parking places for all the cars, so they were trying to encourage people to get their shopping done and get out of town so other people could get there. So they started a nickel an hour parkometer program and had these meters. Oregon, Wikipages. So Wikipages would eventually become things like Wikipedia. But in 1995, Oregon-based programmer Ward Cunningham wanted to create a website where the average Joe could get on and update pages and add pages to it and just have it always growing. He used the word wiki from the Hawaiian term, which means very fast or quick. Pennsylvania has a lot of really cool things that came out of there. The suspension bridge, the first computers, Ferris wheel, and my favorite, bubblegum. Walter
Nice.
Dimer was a full-time accountant in Philadelphia when he started toying with the different recipes for gum, and he actually came up with bubble gum. Gum had already been around, but the actual type of texture and formula they have now where you could actually blow bubbles with it was invented here in Philadelphia.
Very
Rhode Island.
important
Rhode
invention.
Island has a very interesting one. Diners. They came up with diners. They were the first ones to have them, but I think the most impactful one was the automatic sprinkler system that they put in buildings to, knock out fires and stuff. South Carolina. The military submarine.
Okay, so before we get to the military submarine, guys, I just love the American diner experience. Obviously we've have sort of like copycat American diners, in South Africa, and I always find that style of diner to just be, get the typical milkshake or typical diner food. That is my jam. So good on that state for creating the American diner. But yeah, we're going to talk about South Carolina and the military submarine.
In 1864, during the Civil War, Horace Hunley developed the first military submarine, which was put into use during the Civil War. Wow. South Dakota, the cyclotron. Ernest Lawrence invented this particle accelerator in 1932, and it was used to discover things like different elements and cancer treatments. Tennessee, cotton candy. Cotton candy
That's
was
huge.
developed in Nashville, Tennessee in 1897 by a dentist. I get the feeling he was just trying to get more customers.
Yeah.
Texas. I'm sure a lot of you think that their inventions have something to do with Old West and things like that. No, they've invented some pretty cool stuff. First one I want to tell you about is the
Okay, so you're going to talk about the type of... I'm trying to guess with Texas. Surely it has to be, something, farming related, or is it sports related maybe?
electric typewriter. James Field Smathers invented the first electric typewriter in 1912. They also came up with the first handheld calculator. Utah, airbags. Automobile airbags had kind of been on the drawing board since the 1960s, but they really weren't practical until about the mid-1980s when they started installing them in cars. Vermont, sandpaper. At least I should say the sandpaper we know today. Forms of sandpaper can be traced back to China in like the 13th or 14th century, but what we know as sandpaper today was developed in 1834 in Springfield, Vermont. Virginia, chapstick. In the late 1890s, Dr. Charles Brown Fleet, known for inventing health products, came up with chapstick in Lynchburg, Virginia. His wife was the one that came up with the idea of selling it like lipstick in a tube, and that helped the business boom. Oh, yeah. Washington. Windows operating system, which is on most of our computers. Originally, Bill Gates and his band of merry men started Microsoft in New Mexico, but in 1979, they moved to Bellevue, Washington. 2 years later, they came out with the first personal computer operating system. West Virginia, steamboats. Steamboats were invented by James Ramsey in 1787 on the Potomac River. Wisconsin, the blender. If you love margaritas, you can thank Wisconsin for your margarita. Wyoming. Margarita. So they have two interesting ones. One, I'm not sure if it fits, but we're going to go with it. National parks. The first national parks were in Wyoming. They were sort of placed there. I wouldn't say the whole idea was cooked up there. But one thing
I wouldn't say you invented a national park.
They did invent Wyoming was headgear. You know that weird thing you put on your head if you have braces? If you had to wear one of those in the 1970s or 80s, you could thank John Devine for his 1924 invention. Yeah. All right, that's today's video. Hope you got.
Man, that was good. That was fairly entertaining. So many crucial inventions have originated in the United States, and it was nice to see one coming from each state. So folks, let me know, are you pleased with the invention coming from your state? Did they get it wrong? If they did, let me know in the comments below some other inventions that came from your state. I always find your comments more valuable than any video I watch. I read every single comment. But folks, I thoroughly enjoyed that. If you did as well, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It definitely helps a lot. But until next time, I hope you have the best week possible. I'll see you when I see you. Cheers.